All right, everyone, welcome to episode 4. Today's going to be a little different. We're going to be talking about our journeys rather than all the myths that we've been doing so far. I have the wonderful Adelaide and Grace. Grace, welcome back.
Thank you.
Adelaide is the newbie in town. So Adelaide, say hola and let us know who you are.
Brilliant. Well, yes, my name is Adelaide and I am a newbie to Perth. Actually, I grew up in Melbourne and I work in theatre and I work with the youth and currently work with WAPA and teaching and mentoring there. So that's pretty amazing
cool.
space to be in.
Yeah.
What else about me? There's such a hard question sometimes because I guess we've all kind of come to that conclusion where figuring out ourselves is a bit hard to do. So trying to summarize it is also a bit hard to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm an adoptee as well from Ethiopia, and I came to Australia in 2000 and grew up with a big Irish Catholic family.
Yeah, nice.
And grew up in that culture of Irish Catholic shenanigans.
What was that like?
It was both really fun. I think up until about 7 or 8, I didn't really know that I wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
In a very everyday sense, you know. So my experiences was I spent a lot of time with my cousins. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents.
Yeah.
So all of the activities I was doing, I was really welcomed into that space. And so it just kind of didn't relate into my brain that I wasn't quite Irish. I was doing Irish dancing as well as
classes.
Classes as an extracurricular.
River dancing?
Yeah.
Yeah. We used to watch that when we were young.
Yeah.
Our mum would make us watch that.
Yeah.
Like, go, Grace, dance.
Yeah. So
That's really cool.
Yeah, so I was really involved into that culture. We had sing-alongs, we had big cousin nights that had second cousins and third cousins and fourth cousins, and it was just a really family-heavy, really religious space in a lot of ways. So, yeah, I didn't realise until I was about 7 or 8 that wasn't quite my space.
Yeah. How did you come to that? Was there a particular event or?
I don't know if it was any one particular thing. I think it got to the point where a lot of other people, not necessarily my family, but people outside of my family would question what my family looked like with me involved in it. And there was a lot of comments of, oh, wow, this is your daughter. Oh, but where is she actually from? Or, oh, does she know any other dancing? Or especially in the Irish dancing community as well, just having to participate in a space where people would fake tan and people would wear these super curly wigs.
Yeah.
And yet I obviously didn't fake tan, but I also didn't do the wigs.
Okay, so they're like, oh, your natural hair color's curly.
Yeah.
Curly.
Yeah.
Just all natural.
Yeah. So it was just little comments that started to really come to make me feel other outside of what I already, kind of knew. Yeah.
So
because it wasn't as if I didn't know I was adopted. Yeah. I knew that, but I just,
Yeah, the appearance and the physical kind of, they're like, oh, do you know how to do hip hop or R&B or other you also recently got engaged and you have a new life in Perth. Tell us a bit about that.
Yes, I did. Perth's amazing. I mean, I really like it.
Okay, I have to ask you this. Do you like Perth or Melbourne better?
Not going to answer, no comment.
Very diplomatic.
They're two very different places.
They are two very different places. And really, I think for me, Perth is a lot to do with the weather.
Yeah.
And a lot to do with the slowness of life here and the sense of community that's quite large and available but without much demand.
Yeah.
I think in Melbourne, my community was quite demanding in the end.
Yeah.
And I wasn't in a position where I could uphold that at a regular level that I was doing previously. So the move to Perth was something to try and calm myself down a bit and reset a bit. And then I met a beautiful man named Aidan, And we work in the same industry and we work together at Fringe, and it just kind of became really easy to talk to him about things, and he became a real big support. And I went through a lot in our first 6 months with him. And so he just didn't hesitate to be there for me, and he didn't hesitate to take on board what I was saying about my life. And therefore, it just became really easy to start that relationship. And now we're engaged. So
that's beautiful. Next step.
Living.
Sounds like he's a keeper.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Proven. So the first 6 months can be so tough.
Yeah,
they hang around through that. It's like a really good sign.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I actually know him. He's cool.
Thanks. Thanks. Shout out to Aiden.
If you're listening, Aiden, we're a big fan. That's cool. Grace, what have you been up to since last?
Good question. We had our second Ethiopian Australian adoptee group lunch. Yeah. The three of us, obviously. It was so nice to meet Adelaide and hear her story. So I did that. What else? I went to an Ethiopian church.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
How was that?
In Malaga.
An actual service?
An actual service, yeah.
Like
apparently the service went from 7 till like 12 or 11, sorry, and then they have lunch. Yeah. Wow. So I didn't go there from 7, but I went there from 9:30.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was just amazing experience. I've never experienced that. I guess maybe when I was 4 or younger, I probably did experience that.
Yeah.
But as an adult, oh my goodness, it's so different. It was like a complete meditative practice, and I'm just amazed how everyone can just be in that space for that many hours. It's just beautiful.
Yeah. Did someone invite you? Like, is it?
Well, I was organising it with a Ethiopian friend of mine. Yes. Yeah. Nice. So I went with her and her kids.
Yeah. It was beautiful.
It was a beautiful experience.
Was it Orthodox or
it was Orthodox.
Protestant? Yeah. There's a couple.
Yeah, there's a few,
Nice. Did
Orthodox.
you have to cover your hair?
Yeah, so she had a shawl for me, and so I did cover. I came in with an outfit like this. I was like, yes, hide it.
Yeah. How was that? Like, just walking in?
Well, it was interesting because obviously I didn't speak the language or like know what, the priest was saying. But the priest speaks like in a tongue or something. Not everyone knows what he's saying.
I think, the
you know what I mean?
It's called Ge'ez. Yeah,
Ge'ez
it's like an ancient language, I think.
Yeah, okay, wow.
Roughly, I don't remember.
So he talks through like most of it, and no one really knows what he's saying, but you at least are, praying and you bow down. So I was just like observing and fully trying to immerse myself in it. And they'd have groups like the kids singing and dancing and clapping at the front, so that would happen. But in front was like a separation. She'd have the women on one side and the men sitting on one side.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Very interesting.
Wow. Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I haven't experienced it here in Perth, so. But like at our gathering, you were talking about like this idea of reconnecting with culture.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be Ethiopian? Like. What's your thought on like when, what does it mean to be Ethiopian to you?
Honestly, I go through phases to try and figure that out. And I think partly because of the religious needs of our culture or the religious strong points of our culture, I find it sometimes a bit harder to immerse myself more deeply because I'm going through my own process of figuring out religion full stop outside of all of the adoption stuff. So it can be a little bit confronting, that aspect of it. And I think at the moment for me, the culture immersion is something along the lines of trying to reconnect with the language, trying to reconnect with the history. So I listen to certain podcasts, and my actual Ethiopian name, Tarek, means history. So there's a connection to that I'm really, delving into and figuring out. And then I think for the religious aspect, I'm not quite there yet for it.
Yeah. Because that's a big part of like Ethiopian culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously that looks like different, but majority tend to be like a Orthodox or Coptic Orthodox. So, but like, what does it like? Is it just a culture and the religion that you guys associate more? Like, people ask you, they're like, "Oh, you're Ethiopian."
Well, for me, anyway, initially when people would say like, "Oh, what's your background? You know, where are you from?" And I'd say, "Oh, Ethiopia," and with it comes that assumption that, "Oh, well, you know how to cook the food, you know what you're eating," and there's all these questions about like the history, and they'll sort of say like, "Oh, Haile Selassie," you know, and I'm supposed to like know exactly what's going on with that. And it really made me think in those moments like, oh, should I know about this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And I never really took it seriously enough, I think, until I really wanted to learn about myself and grow more and understand my triggers and all that. So since seeing my psychologist, it's really helped me. She's helped me sort of look and delve into this feeling of belonging, you know, and looking into this Ethiopian side that I have, obviously. And that it's okay to ask those questions and look into that history, because that is a part of me, you know. So now I do hear those questions. They still come up. They'll always come up. But I have more knowledge, so I can actually be able to share that knowledge and talk about these things and not feel triggered by it. You know?
And I think, the questions that I often, it's really funny. Italian old men. Do you guys get this with Italian old men who love to be like, oh, Ethiopia. That was one of ours. That was one of ours. And when I was younger, I used to be so confused by that. I used to be like, well, no, Ethiopia was never colonized. What are you talking about? And just it was interesting that there were people who weren't even Ethiopian who knew more about the history of the place that I had come from than I did. And yet I grew up in a family who loves history, And, you know, if you ask me who the king was who the queen was in 1560 in England, I'd be able to tell you. And if you ask me, you know, what battle of the Agincourt was, I'd be able to tell you. So like the European history that was important to the Irish side of my adoptive family, I've got such a breadth of knowledge on that. And then on the Ethiopian side, up until recently, I was like, meh.
Say what?
Say what? I totally agree with you that, that sense of where we've come from and where we're going as a country, as an Ethiopian country, the fact that I didn't know that made me feel like I wasn't quite part of it.
Ethiopia. Just like, because it's like the history of running and like, you know, be like, oh, you're Ethiopian, so you must run, you know, well. And it's like, I'm average over there. That was the thing for me at school. Like, I was dominant at school, but back home, I did not remember winning any. So, but like, there's this assumption that people have. And like, for me, obviously, it's the language that I'm able to retain and I feel connected through that. But also, like you guys saying, I'm really interested in the history and what's going on and being a feedback. That's where. But I really like how you guys actually said, like, you're starting that journey now. Like finding out the history. Because that's where it starts. Before that, you're like, I am, but I don't know what that actually means. So have you guys been reconnecting with family as of recently? What does that look like, that journey? Because that's adoption as well, because you've got this family, that the country that we live in Australia, and we're really connected. Various types, depending on your story. I have to say that, because not everybody is. But like, we have to go back and reconnect for majority of us with culture and with some people biological family. So have you started that journey and that step? Adelaide's like,
this is a full story.
It is a full story, and I think it's a full story for anybody. I don't think I'm unique in my delving of it, and I don't think I'm unique in some of the complications I've had to deal with. So I was relatively fortunate enough that from the moment of my adoption, my adoptive mum had gone to the effort of finding my biological family for me.
Yeah.
So I've always known of these people, and I've always known that they've known of me in Australia and what I've been up to and stuff. And we were chatting about this yesterday, but the orphanage that we both came from, the Koala Centre in Addis, because that was part of an Australian government setup. There's a obligation for some of our adoptive parents to actually send letters and photos and lots of mementos back to our adoptive parents to let them know, our biological parents to let them know how we're going and how we're tracking. So I kind of had a slight connection with them up until about the age of 13. And I'd even met them twice. Both my biological father and a bunch of siblings and cousins and aunts and the extended family.
There's
many people. And they very much feel connected to me in a way that is much stronger familial link than I feel towards them.
That's so interesting.
And I don't know if that's just because of the distance, or if there's a lot. I mean, there was a lot of anger when I was a kid. Towards my biological father for giving me up and for sending me on this journey. And then there was also just the language barrier and then an education barrier. And then it just becomes astronomical to a kid. The chasm that gets built from what's happened to us becomes so big. And there's so many different emotions, from guilt to like obligation, duty, excitement. And so when I was about 13, I kind of cut off contact. I couldn't deal with it all. And unfortunately, I don't know that I can deal with it any better now as an adult. I think there's a lot of work that I still need to do on that front. But as of last year in November, I've got reconnected to them via Facebook. The wonders of Facebook. Thanks, Mark Zuckerberg.
Bringing the world together.
Exactly. And so I'm connected on Facebook to 3 of my siblings and through them connected to everybody. And it's been kind of tough.
Do they speak like English? Like
they speak English better than I speak Amharic. That's for sure. The privilege of being in a white country is that we don't necessarily feel the need to learn a different language. So they speak some form of English. It's not very grammatically coherent or and I know that there are times when they revert back to Amharic script and or like the Latin spelling of Amharic words. But it's the culture that's different. That's really hard to
get your
to communicate through, I think. It's very hard to explain to them what I do for a living. Working in theatre, working as a lighting designer, working in a space that's got technology that is not something that they've seen any time in their lives, other than maybe through a TV screen. But even then, some of them haven't even had that opportunity. So explaining my day to day to them in a sort of like, oh, what'd you get up to? Or I went to work. Or what does that entail? How do I explain all these things? And then the fact that I'm living with a man and not married.
Did you tell them that as well?
Well, I told them that I was, I started to, and then my brother was like, oh, hopefully you're not, living with him and stuff. And like he started the prompting of like what was appropriate and not appropriate. And so all of a sudden there was like a huge part of my life that I felt the need to hide from them.
Yeah.
And again, I then start to feel like guilty because there's a part of me that's like, oh, how very like not racist, but like presumptuous, I guess, of me to be like that they couldn't understand it or they wouldn't want to try and understand it for me. So I end up just feeling like very in this place of struggle. And then on top of just all that, there's this assumption that because I'm here in Australia, I'm very rich.
Yeah,
and
let's talk about that.
If yes. And honestly, if there are any people out there who want to sponsor me, donate to me, make me very rich, I would appreciate that. So shout out to that first.
So she can live this dream, right? Yeah.
But yeah, so there's this assumption that I live in Australia and therefore I'm very well off.
Yeah.
And there's this notion or sense that as the family member who's making the most, I will give money back to them and support them.
Yeah.
And within the first month of me speaking to my biological brother, he asked for 10,000 Australian dollars. Like not just a little bit.
My word.
Like just straight up was like, I need a car so I can do a new job and you could pay for a car. And I was like, okay, how much is a car? And I was like, look for a secondhand car, do this. So I was like, not necessarily to offer him the money, but at that point I was like, if it's only going to cost me like maybe $2,000 between me and my mum, we could probably do that.
Yeah.
But when his request was like $10,000, I just kind of, I was really insulted, hurt. Because it just made the whole interaction up until that feel really dirty.
Yeah,
you know,
there's that part of
a
it where you're
transactional
kind
sort of relationship rather than meaningful.
Yeah. And also it's one thing for strangers to not understand the emotional toll of our adoption because they get told a certain thing.
narrative,
But when the biological family who have also been in some form of pain because of this adoption don't understand what we're going through and don't give us that space to also be nervous, scared, sad, all of the things that we're feeling, it becomes really like, oh, I thought you would be more understanding. And so when they're not, it just really shakes up the intention and the want to continue that relationship. And so it's been maybe 8 months that I've been in Facebook communication with them and the requests for money have been a lot. The emotional abuse when I say I can't give money has been a lot.
That's the other thing, hey.
And then the extra information that I've been told about my family and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I have more siblings than I originally knew about. And I have more, like my biological mum who has passed away, like her life before the adoption, like it was a complete mystery to me, and all of a sudden these siblings who are much older than me are starting to tell me about that. And it's weird to feel so disconnected from this person who was in my life for at least 3 years, if not 4, depending on how old I am. Another thing about adoption. So it's just been really overwhelming. It's been really overwhelming. And the last month in particular, there's been a lot of fighting in Ethiopia, right near Deborah Tabor, which is where my family is from. And so there's been no internet connection for them. So I haven't heard from my brother and my sister. And so after complaining to my partner, Aiden, about the fact that my brother was messaging me every day, all the time, and I just needed him to stop. And now he's stopped. And it's terrifying. So
it's just like the tension between the two worlds is so like never ending. And then I think it's like they have their own presupposition of what a life that entails to us, which is generally speaking, like it's all good. Like you should
it's
not
all great.
experience anything. You should have money to like put down when I need you to.
Yeah.
You know, and technically they don't even understand of what things cost here as well. So it's that trying to like navigate that through, which I've gone through very similar things, because I think generally speaking we want to help.
Yes,
we want to help.
absolutely.
I actually think I'm like, I want to help, but gotta meet me halfway as well. And it's just so much tension between this like two worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite challenging for you. You're just starting to. What about you, Grace? Like,
well, it's interesting just hearing all of that, because I often wondered, like, if my parents were alive, how my life would be different.
Yeah.
You know, my biological parents, if they were alive, like how my life would be different. And I would picture it in this like magical, like amazingness, right? But, you know, listening to that, it's like, well, no, that's, you know, that's living in a fantasy world. Like, it's not necessarily that it's all going to be great. There's going to be things that come up like that.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So I have seen, I've talked about it before on here, but I've met up with my auntie and my cousin and my stepsister they're the only people that I know that are in Ethiopia that are biologically related to me. And I went back when I was 15 when I saw them. And like you said, you know, that the language barrier and being a teenager at the time as well, it was just so overwhelming. I didn't know what to feel or what to think, you know. But my auntie was obviously familiar with who I was and what I looked like, and she just cried. She was just really tearful. But again, that for me was like, you know, because I'd never really spoken to her before this meeting. Like we'd never exchanged words. So since that time, I haven't actually continued to interact with them, because again, it was like I didn't really know who I was, and I was just this detached person from two worlds, like the Ethiopian culture, but also even the Australian culture. Like, didn't know where I fit, so I wouldn't really follow up on things necessarily, probably because I wasn't ready.
yeah.
I wanted to dive into it. So since then, now, I really am wanting to delve into it. I want to know who else is there that could be biologically related to me. I want to do the DNA testing. So I'm on the journey to discover that. And I've been talking to a lot of people who are like fully Ethiopian and who have been adopted, and listening to their stories. And it's really helping me put together how I can sort of track down people that are related to me in Ethiopia, but also like learn the language so that it can be easier for me to connect, you know, learning the cooking and the culture and the history. And that's where I'm at the moment. So, and planning to go on a trip there to sort of find them and meet up with them again, but be in a better state, you know, of being able to actually converse and say hello and, you know, ask them about their life and where they've come from. I've also been trying to track down a lady that was involved in my adoption process. She was this Switzerland woman working in the missionary. So she was like a huge catalyst in my adoption process. And I actually I was researching her. She doesn't come up anywhere on Facebook. So it's like so difficult. But she came up on this image of with other Ethiopians. She'd gone back there to do a 6-week sort of helping boys and girls within the wet season to be able to come to school still and build something for themselves. And so I saw an image of her, so I've just emailed that sort of website or whatever to see if I can get in contact with her. And it just will be so good, because she'll be able to shed light on what actually happened at that time, because she knew my uncle, she knew my dad, because he worked at the blind broom school there. And she'd just be able to connect the dots for me. So it's just about learning, like, fully where I've come from, what's my story from the really beginning, you know.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And the fact that she's Swiss will give you a language barrier difference. It's not the same at all.
Even a completely different perspective, what you're saying, So it's about talking to everyone to get literally a story and an image of what actually happened.
Yeah.
And I am doing that already. Like I'm literally on the journey. So and it's just so beautiful, honestly.
Yeah.
It's making me feel whole. It's just it's beautiful.
It's so exciting, I think, and scary and all the other emotion. But when you know part of you, like the puzzles kind of piece together. Like for me, there was so many unanswered questions on my first trip. It was like kind of life changing because I'm like, I got to like, oh, this didn't make sense when I was little because I was like, quite old. But there was a significant time where I spent with my biological parents. And then there was times where extended family, and then there was a gap when I was in the orphanage. So it was like, oh, I can now have the language. I can ask my cousins of like what that memory was.
Yep.
But when I first went, I couldn't speak the language. So it was like, I was asking translators. I'm like, can you tell, like I've had this question like in my mind the whole time. Like, can you fill me in? And then you find out, and it kind of gives you pace. It gave me pace. That's kind of what, and then I can move on into the next. So it's so like bridge building.
Yeah.
And incredibly like crazy journey, I think, reconnection, and it looks so differently for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have to pick your time where you switch off, you switch on, but it's definitely not something that's lightly. You go to Ethiopia and there's like, and they're waiting and you're just like, I see them in the distance.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It's not my experience.
Like a romantic film. It just all pieces together.
Yeah.
But
it's waiting like for you.
It's not a Nike ad, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. This one might be a bit of a tough question, but do you experience any emotional pain when you think about your birth family?
Yeah, there's a lot of pain involved. There's a lot of grieving the what if. And it's so hard to get over that bit because it's so ethereal and it's so abstract, and so there's not a lot of tangible ways to fix grieving the what if. It's so bizarre and surreal that my biological family are alive and have spent their lives together with each other, you know, and so I'm so on the outside of that.
Yeah.
They're in such a different space to me, even in safety, even like the physical space that they're in. Like currently there's a war and fighting right near where they live. And I think potentially we've all had that kind of experience.
Yeah.
And to read about the Western viewpoint on that war.
Yeah, because the diasporas are the ones that are actually really vocal about this. Spaces at the moment on social
and
media.
then you try and have that conversation with your biological family, and they can't answer the questions that you need answered.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of grieving.
Yeah.
There's a lot of grieving that goes on.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, even to this day, there's a lot of anger for me.
Yeah.
Towards the fact that I'm the only one who's not with them.
Picked out. Yeah. And are you like acknowledging it, and how are you dealing with that?
I mean, I acknowledge it
on a regular basis, like today.
Yeah, I can access it, and I can name it.
Yeah,
but I can't talk it to the people that I'm sad and angry with.
Yeah, that's.
And so that makes it hard to get over it.
Yeah, because it's like, it's so hard to honestly, even one language that you said you don't even speak Amharic properly to actually be. And the other one is when they actually think it's the right thing that they've done. Yeah.
Or even
by
like
you up. Yeah.
Talking to my adoptive mother about attachment theory is hard enough, you know what I mean? And she's like been in a place where she could read all the psychology papers that she wanted to.
Yeah.
And so then to try and explain that to my biological father, it's like, I may as well, I mean, I am speaking a different language, but I mean, I may as well be speaking an alien language. Like it's so foreign a concept to... It's not that he's not sad, and it's not that he doesn't grieve that I left either. And he definitely grieves that I didn't come back to live or stay.
Yeah, right. Has he expressed that?
Yeah, he's expressed that.
Yeah.
but it doesn't allow for the actual conversation of the complication of emotions that I feel.
Yeah.
And it doesn't allow for the psychoanalysis that I think currently might be important for me to be able to go through. And I'm hoping that there's a pathway to recovery and forgiveness of these emotions without having to have these conversations, because I'm not 100% sure that I'll ever be able to have these conversations.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. It's like being open to whether you'll be able to address it for what it is, but you need to move on so you can actually
I still have to move
something.
on regardless
Yeah.
of getting the answers.
Yeah.
So I think, definitely there's hurt, there's anger, and there's grief involved.
Yeah. Grief is a big one. For me, it was like grieving the language, grieving like both my biological parents passed away. And I don't think I even thought that there's room to grieve. Like I didn't grieve as a child. So it was something that I had to actually do later.
Yeah.
I think like even about a year ago, it was just like, grieving my parents. So it's been a while, but it's like a driving force inside. So when my psychologist asked me, I was just like, do you want to talk about this? And I was like, I should probably do it. But I feel like I'm so old now. Like, I should be it's been years. It's like, I should move on.
I have no knowledge of grieving my biological mum.
Yeah.
And I know that I was at least 3 years old when she died.
Yeah.
And it's like even talking about it, like talking about the other things, I'm like at this moment emotional talking about the other things. Talking about my biological mum, she has no deeper space in me at the moment.
Yeah. So young. Yeah.
I was so young. But talking to people in Australia who have had their parents die at a young age. Because the people around them talk about the grief and talk about the memories and give that collective knowledge of this person, they still grieve that person.
Yeah.
And they continue to grieve that person as they grow up, and sure, that grief gets manageable.
Yeah.
But I've never had that collective conversational memory of this woman.
Yeah.
So she's so hard to grieve for.
Yeah.
Or even hard to think of emotionally in any capacity.
Yeah, because you're like stories, like photos as well. Like mine.
I have none of that.
I don't have any photo of my mom. No one can find it because it was such a, it was in the village. So they didn't really have photos back then. Like I could not locate any photos with my dad. He lived in Addis. So it was like, a family member had it, but like it started to like those memories started to get fade away of what they look like. I can imagine it's when
it's
you're
just
younger,
it's such a phantom person, and it's such a it's really something that I feel quite emotionally numb towards. There's no there's nothing there's nothing, and sometimes I feel emotional towards that, the fact that there's nothing. I get really like frustrated. But with her, I mean, it wasn't until this year that I knew her name, and I don't even know how to pronounce it. Like,
but how could you know though when
you know what I mean?
Young, like
you were
I know,
very young.
And yet, again, I've got a whole biological family who know and talk and mourn her, and really think about her, and it's another thing that I've not been afforded.
It's
it's another disconnect almost, isn't it? It's that's hard. It's tough.
I can imagine. Younger adoptees.
It's just, I mean, for me, like I'm similar to you. I didn't know my mum. Well, I can't remember. I don't have any memories of her living, but I think there has been mourning along the way of just crying that they're not alive, in general. But I wouldn't have considered that to be mourning. You know what I mean? Because I was a kid, and so it did happen. But I think more so these last couple of years since seeing a psychologist, I've just been honestly just been weeping literally every week for 2 years. Just going through a lot of trauma and talking about it and just facing it has really led me to coming to a place of just more gratefulness, and not everything's not perfect, you know, things still happening that, you know, I would not like to happen, but I can look at it in a different way and just go, okay, it is what it is, and then look at what I'm going to do about it. So it's really helped me come to a better place and understanding of, you know, negative things that happen and that have happened. I'm just able to deal with a lot better, like moving from a place of just love and gratitude more than, you know, complaining and hating and being angry and emotional. But I mean, it's hard work. I cried through most of the years. So yeah, I mean, and it's going to be still growing and stuff for the next some years, but I'm just so appreciative of where I've come to now, honestly. Yeah,
I think it's while you're moving forward, you're looking back and grieving and trying to create space in the best that you know you haven't had. And then at the same time, you're like, yeah, let's go. There's a new life to do. It's such a hard and challenging space. Thank God for psychologists.
Tell me about it.
You know,
I always think, I'm just like, we should all just be allocated psychologists when we're bored.
Like
you get one. You get one. Yes.
But we would have lost ours.
At birth. Just get a new one when I come
They
back.
can get adopted too.
Get you're just attached at the hip.
I love that. Moving on to our next question, what challenge do you find when it comes to identifying with your cultural and racial identity? We touched on it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I think the racial identity is a really large question.
Yeah.
And I think because in Australia in particular, our racism is not solely for people of like African origin. We've got there's a lot of racism towards Indigenous people. There's a lot of racism towards other immigrants, whether they be from Asia or other countries. So racially in Australia, it can be really tough. And I think my experiences growing up it definitely run along the lines of a lot of microaggressions and a lot of moments where I've had to sit and be like, whoa, was that intended to be as mean as it sounded? Or did they really mean to hurt me with that comment? Or no, forgive them, they're just being ignorant, or they're just curious. And so like that double think that I had to go through as a child to try and give compassion and space to the multitude of people that I was meeting who were getting confronted with what is a bewildering sight, like between me, my mum and my brother. We're three very different looking people.
And people are trying to go like, oh, how are you a family?
And how are you all connected and what does this actually mean? And then being in primary school, the only black kid for a couple of years and definitely being the only black kid in all my classes for most of my primary school life. Then in high school, I guess there was two others, so not the only, winning.
Friends.
So, and even just acknowledging my own inherent biases because of the people that I grew up with. So,
we were talking about this, wasn't it? The privileges adoptees have on the other side. I think you phrased it really well yesterday.
We grow up in a very white-centric society with the adoptive parents and adoptive families that we are living with, and we get awarded privileges by being associated with them, and we get doors open for us for being associated with them. And in my case in particular, I was able to go to private schools. I was able to get into a great university. I mean, sure, I'm smart enough to have done it, but the doors were open much quicker I had the ability to be able to travel, see
and
the
the
world.
names as well, the last names.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
My name.
yeah.
For us two in particular, having white sounding names and changed names.
Yeah.
That phone call, that email that I send does not inherently open up for the other person receiving it a bias until they meet me.
Yeah.
So, it's been a very like tight line to walk along, to acknowledge those privileges and those doors that have been opened because of those associations with white people that I've been given through this adoption. But then to also try and explain to these people who have opened those doors for me that I do still experience racism, and I do still experience racial inequality, and I do still experience moments where even with my family whom I love and who are never intentionally trying to hurt me, will say things that are off color and will say things that are potentially painful for me to hear, and it's a choice to battle that, and it's a choice to sometimes let things slide. And so I think racially it's a really interesting space to be sitting in.
Especially interracial adoptees. I think that's like such a space where it's like, oh, I fit in here, and then I get all of this, and then even if you go to the other side, it's like, oh, not quite Ethiopian or
black
or black. Like
black is I'm not black. I don't do the, and
you don't have the sass.
I don't. I mean, I have the sass. I have some of the sass, but it's so Americanized. The notion of black is so Americanized. It's so raps and hip hop and your weaves and your this and your that and it's like, it's not that we don't have that, because that's part of African culture, not just American Africans, but the racial connotations that we get, like the fact that I did Irish dancing instead of hip hop, like what the fuck, you know what I mean? So I'm not that black. And I'm not
black enough.
Well, what does black mean?
I think that's
and I'm not
interesting
Indigenous
question.
black, and I'm not this black, but I'm also not this white, or I'm not,
You just don't fit into any category of what people see as what you should be.
Absolutely. So
it's like such a tight in between space that we're like, oh, let's find our own way.
I feel like the people who probably understand how I feel are those who are biracial. Even though I myself am not biracial biologically, I'm biracial culturally.
I actually find that they're much more understanding towards
the spaces that I've lived.
The true space rather than, because even if people come here with their families, they still, to a certain extent, one culture is dominant to the other. Or like, so whereas we're like, we look like one culture, but we don't necessarily live that culture. So it's just like a reverse thing. So I find, interracial, they're much more like, we get it too, because we've got two worlds that we're also juggling. What about you, Grace? What's the challenges that you experience when it comes to cultural identity?
So many growing up. I considered myself to be literally white.
Like
I didn't even think about it.
Color.
I was like, yep, this is my family. Like I fit into it. Basically because they really made me feel like their own, There was a secure attachment there. I mean, it wasn't perfect, growing up, but it was enough to feel like I was part of the family. So when I started going to school and like meeting other people, other families who were Caucasian, that's when I started to realize like, I don't fit in, like apparently, like because I've got my skin's different. They're asking questions about my name, like where does that come from? Like how are you?
And it's Grace.
Or my last name, because it's hyphenated as well. So there's always questions about like, where does the hyphen come from? Is that your mum? What side of the family? So diving into questions about my history, my culture, everything straight off the bat. And so in the past I would just expose all of that. Like I'd tell people, this is my last name, this is where I'm from, I'm adopted.
Like a little script.
Just like literally my whole life in one question. But that's probably because I was just so agreeable and just very people pleasing. But back to the question. So people would be like, oh, you're white on the inside, but you're you're black on the outside.
Oreo.
Yeah, you're an Oreo. So
coconut. I've heard of coconut.
Coconut, yeah. And just like these labels that I just never really thought about. Like I never considered to think of myself like that. But it's such an amazing insight to how others see you. Like you don't, because you live in your own world and your own perspective. When you start to pick these things up, you're like, wow, like how does this look? How does this look? Like finally when I was maybe in my teens, I was like, oh, like when I'm with my dad, oh my God, I'll tell you the story. We were flying. So you're talking about how, you know, the being connected to Western parents, you get to travel, you get to do all this stuff. Same with my family. So I went to a private school and we got to travel a lot. I was sitting next to my dad on the plane and he just all of a sudden fainted, like on me. And this flight attendant goes, oh, ma'am, I was 14 or 13 at the time. Your husband, is he okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
And my dad is like an old looking man. Sorry, Dad.
Older
looking gentleman, like so, you know. And I'm 13. But I must have looked a little bit older for my age. But like just that is just there's no comprehension that I could be family. You know.
There's no other.
Absolutely.
Young bride.
So go on.
Whenever me and my brother like hang out when we were teenagers in particular. There was just moments where people would assume that we were boyfriend and girlfriend. And again, like partly it's because as brothers and sisters, you are intimate in a way that friends aren't. You know what I mean? And so if you were to look at these two people, you'd be like, well, their intimacy suggests something. But yeah, there was a time when he used to be like, I don't want to hang out with you because you're killing my game. You're killing my game.
He's like, I can't be a girl.
It's so funny.
That's so honest.
But totally.
That off the bat.
Yeah, the assumptions of, you know, what all the stories that they're thinking in their head. But yeah, just also a lot of older white people. Like I remember I was doing RILA, like leadership camp thing, and I got to the end of it. It was like a week camp thing, learning how to be a good leader, and then you had to present to the people who sponsored you. So, and these were a lot of older white people. So they're sitting around tables and I'm just sort of at the front just saying my thank yous and stuff, and then I sit down and they're like, oh, are you enjoying it here? You know, like you must be an exchange student. Like where did you come? And I'm like, I'm an Australian citizen. Like I live here. And, you know, so but they just don't understand. But also like for me, I think my story has helped me view the fact that you can't assume someone's life where they come from. And so instead of just putting words into their mouth and telling them where they're from or what they are, is just not even asking those questions, allowing it to come out naturally, you know?
Rather than like creating this like awkward space, now you're all stuck like, what do I do? Like,
I find the where are you from question to be the hardest one to explain to other people as to why that's so uncomfortable and potentially racist. Because I've had so many people who are white Australian tell me, oh no, but we all ask that to everybody. We're always asking that. And they have no concept to the degree we get asked that in comparison to anybody else. And it's really hard to explain why that one in particular feels like such a micro, well, sometimes for me it feels quite macro aggression, but you know, it is actually quite a potentially racist triggering moment for us.
Well, we were doing like one of the myths was that like, because it triggers us because the belonging is such a big part of like something that we're trying to navigate as adoptees. Like we don't already feel like we don't belong, and then someone coming and be like, explain yourself, why are you here? It's just like it feels like it hurts like that more. And because also the amount of times we get it, by then we're done. So it's like it's so amplified by that. And I think that's something that people don't really understand is like we're having to justify and having to like really navigate this belonging. It's not already easy for us
to explain it or express it. Because you don't really understand it yourself. And then someone's like, tell me. And you're like, I don't know.
I feel like I had it all like worked out, and I'm like happy right now, and now I'm all over. I don't know. Confusion. Yeah.
But interestingly, I find that it's not just white people. It's everyone. Like, you know, someone who's completely Ethiopian, for example, will ask me, "Oh, where are you from?" Like, "Oh, you must be Habesha." Oh, this and already painted a picture for me of what I am. And so it's like you're not in that world. You're not in the other world. It's you're in your own little space here.
We
figuring it out.
We create our own one.
Yes.
Yeah. So on that, you know, disclosing information, do you guys, how comfortable do you feel disclosing your adoption status?
I definitely go through phases.
Yeah.
And I've been a bit cheeky with it previously in my life. Like, you know, there's been times where I've really been like, yeah, no, my family's from Ireland. And I'll even try and put on an Irish accent, and like, because I know the whole story of my family, my adopted family, I can be like, yeah, we're from Kerry, we're from this, I've got this information. And it just boggles people, you know, it just like stumps them in this.
Can you do it for us now?
Oh, no, sorry. It has to come out of a genuine sense of panic.
Tomorrow, call her and be like,
so there's a definite like moments where I've gone out of my way to let the assumptions of other people, whether it be that my whole Ethiopian family is here with me, and therefore that's the end of that conversation. And I've even straight up lied to people and said that I was born in Australia. There has definitely been times in my...
For that, is it because it's just easier? Like, what was the reason to kind of go, you know what?
It's the... I think when I was younger, I was really free-flowing with the information. You know, you're a kid and you want people to find you interesting, and that's something that is particularly interesting to certain people. And then you also want to... Like, there's... Yeah, I don't know. It was just much more free flowing when I was a kid. And then it got tiring and it got triggering. And so, and it was never just a simple, oh yeah, I'm adopted.
There's more questions.
And that's it. That's the end of the conversation sort of thing. It was always a good 5 to 10 minute follow up. And when it was just follow-ups of like, curiosity and what the story was, I was more often than not okay with it. But when some of the follow-ups were like, congratulations, or that's so good for you, or you should feel so privileged, like when they were of a moral nature in the follow-ups, it incensed me. I was furious with those sort of and I was always polite and smiling.
You know,
like
inside,
no one knew. No one knew. And I think, honestly, Hannah Gadsby in her Nanette makes a really good point of this. There is an easiness to make a joke of the things that hurt you. And my adoption story became this like joke of a thing, you know, like this quick, easy, banterous bit of conversation that I could whip out and then close back down, and no one needed to know how deeply it hurt me. And therefore I didn't know how deeply it was always hurting me. And so it just got to a point where I was like, fuck it. I don't want to tell people. I want to get to the end of this interaction with this person about any other thing that's interesting in my life, whether it be, you know, what I was doing with my aunt, what I was doing at school, what I was doing travel-wise, what I was doing with my friends. Like, my whole world is interesting. My whole world is interesting.
There's so much more to you, who you are, other than apart from that. And I also think the other thing is you should be able to tell it on your terms. There's this expectations that just because I asked a question that you should tell me. But I think, we should be able to tell it on our basis. And like, I'm very much the same. It really depends on who you are.
It really depends on how you ask.
And how you ask, what the vibe and the energy. And also, do I have time? Do I not want to get into that space? Do I know you like that? Do I trust you? Like, nah.
Sometimes I feel like having just like a little business card that's like, here you go. Here's all the information.
Find out more about me.
You can go to this website.
Scan this QR code.
Go to Google.
Yeah, but I think for me at the moment, if I've known you for more than a week, you will probably know that I'm adopted. Yeah. If I'm meeting you for that day and I don't think I'm ever going to see you again, I'm probably going to lie to you or give you some form of omission. And that's the truth.
Yeah, stay around. I love that.
Definitely.
Yeah. What about you?
So I think I spoke about it a little bit earlier, but I would just literally share my whole story in life and be like, here you go, have it on a platter. But then quickly realized that it was not helpful for me because I felt like I'd lose something, just, and so now I sort of have developed a way where if someone says something, I just let them believe that that's what it is. So I just won't say anything, but it still irks me to lie. Those things you don't want to be lying or be dishonest. Like you want to be fully you and honest and come to the table as that. But it's just too complicated with your feelings to be able to do that. And so like I look at it as any way that you can make it not, spotlight on you and have to share all of it is worth it, I think. So I just kind of change it the way, like my tactics change each time depending on the person. Like if they're saying, oh, your brothers, do they look like you? And are they as gorgeous as you or something? And I'd just be like, yeah, no, your mum. Do you have a sister? Like, I'm like, yeah, she looks like me, not like, at all, completely opposite.
Yeah.
But just let them believe that. And then, if I've connected with someone and it's developed into a relationship where I trust them, like you were saying, Messi, I'm more than happy to be like, yeah, by the way, like I am. And I know I'm not going to be hurt from their questions because I've already developed that core connection.
Yeah.
So, I feel like I've taken ownership of it now and just been like, I can share it when I want to.
Yeah.
It's my story.
Yeah.
And I don't have to.
Yeah.
I don't need to.
We're loving this conversation, but we're like, time. I'm so sad. But just before we go, today we've covered quite a fair bit of like cultural identity, like biological family. Like what's the one message that you leave our listeners with?
I guess it depends who our listeners are. If our listeners are other adoptees, the message is it's okay. It's tough. It's easy. It's whatever. You're allowed to go through this journey however you're going through this journey and we're here to support in any capacity.
Yeah.
And if you're not adoptee and you want to know a bit more about us and things like that, just give as much compassion to us as you can because like anything in your life that's potentially traumatic, you would want compassion and space and love flown towards you. So this, even though it's like a huge part of our life and it feels very public because society has made it kind of public, it is needing compassion and space and love.
To keep like navigating that.
It's really cool.
That.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'd say a big key is acceptance, like accepting your story as yours and it being unique to you and just accepting what's come with it, your traumas and everything. And then from that you can be grateful for what you do have and then, try and understand what it is that you want in life and then follow that. Yeah.
I like that. Amazing. Thank you so much. I love this conversation. Thank you everybody for staying with us. Until next time.
Thank you. Thanks, Messi.
Thanks, Messi.
We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.